watching again, everybody. I'm just going to do a brief overview on what I think, in my personal opinion, makes a good game. This is just a personal opinion. None of these are above the others. All of these have a role in games, in my personal opinion. So the first topic that I will start with on what makes a good game. Every game should have an aspect of exploration. Under exploration, I would say that there should be rewards for exploration. Games like Zelda do a great job at this. Games like Mario do a great job at this. Even Ukulele, which a lot of people don't really like that game, but Donkey Kong 64, Conkers Bad Fur Day.
I don't think so. I've only just got comfy. Have you ever sat on a piece of Gothic architecture for 200 years? Gets right up your ass, you know.
Heck, even Halo, I don't know too much about the newer Halo games. I know more about the original Halo games. Call of Duty has a little bit, not too much. But exploration is a huge subject matter when it comes to games. Rewards such as korok seeds or even coins or something that makes you feel a little bit like you're about to come into something and unlock something, or an expenditure. That's just one of the rewards of exploration. Another reward is talking to NPCs and discovering small details about lore, small details about even effects in the game. World of Warcraft, Zelda do both of these. In the aspect of Zelda, if you talk to certain NPCs, they tell you little bits and details about the game that you wouldn't know unless you went out of your way to talk to them. As well as World of Warcraft, used to have little side missions dedicated to other games. Reward for difficulty, I'll put that as the next subject to cover. Reward for difficulty, what I mean by that is you should only get certain rewards after a certain amount of difficulty in a game. You should need to work really hard in order to achieve something that you would find is valuable in the game. And what I mean by difficulty is either it could be a difficult strategy or puzzle, or it could be a boss fight and hack and slash mechanics that would set aside from the average player. So combat mechanics, and the combat mechanics for every game differ. I would say that combat mechanics could make its own section, but at the same time, every game has a different style. In Mario, you just jump on a Goompa's head. In Final Fantasy, you have a different turn-based system in many different Final Fantasy games. So combat mechanics, I'm not going to cover. That would be a video in itself, but I think that the combat mechanics and whatever you consider difficulty as the game developer would make a huge determination on what you should get for reward and how much effort was made. Next subject that I'll cover, strategy. Strategy or puzzles. Strategy and puzzles could be either put together, such as in Banjo-Kazooie, you get puzzle pieces, or you have to step on a button and a timer goes off and you have a certain amount of time to get somewhere. That's one type of puzzle. And then the other type of puzzle is like in League of Legends, you have to crunch numbers and you need to understand what stats are the important stats, what stats do we want to put where, and how much of it. These numbers can make a huge optimization and a huge difference towards the end goal of what you're trying to achieve. So those numbers put together, 5 numbers off is enough to certainly lose. Next subject I will cover is learning curves. Learning curves, and what I mean by that is some games have great learning curves, other games have bad learning curves. And what I mean by bad is not so much as you have a lot to learn. It's more along the lines of they didn't teach you very well. Not sure if many people have seen Ego Raptor's Mega Man X video, but he does a good job at covering this. When he explains how Mega Man, at the very beginning of the game, he starts on the left side of the stage. If you try to move left, there's a wall. So you only have the option to go right. So the game taught you, just by doing that you need to go right. There's other SNES games that have absolutely no sense of direction. You had to pick up a guide and read what you had to do in order to play the game. If you have to read an entire book just to learn how to start the game, then they didn't teach you very well. That is a poor learning curve. Sure, it's probably great for gamers who went out of their way to learn, but it's a little bit much to have to do that. Dwarf Fortress, if anybody's played that game, I love Dwarf Fortress. But one thing that I have to say about that game is it has a very steep learning curve, and they don't do a fantastic job at teaching you it, but that's not because they didn't want to. It's because the tools that they're using kind of limit them on teaching you the aspects of the game. So you have to do a lot of research on that, which is fine. Learning curves can determine whether a person continues to play your game. If you have a learning curve so steep that you're still learning things and you're not being told to after a few hours, and you have no idea how to learn it other than pull open Gameopedia.learn, then you're not going to keep playing that game after a certain amount of time. Next subject I'll cover, lore. Lore in some games is a huge advantage. It determines, again, where you place these on your scale. I recently went through and beat Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I would say that that game has a good combat system. It's definitely different. It's slower than others. The learning curve was a little rough, but once you get it down, it's rewarding for what it is. That game has a little bit more lore than game, I think. There's a lot more cinematics than I kind of expected, and they didn't do it bad. The only reason it worked is because of how emotionally affecting it was to the player. Lore is good, but it has to emotionally affect the player. If it does not emotionally affect them, then they're not enjoying it. Even World of Warcraft has emotional affection in its cinematics. Many other games do as well. The point stands that lore has to affect the way that the player feels. And if you prioritize lore, you need to prioritize gameplay as well. However, with a lot of effort, I guess you can prioritize lore to the point where gameplay is less important. It would take quite a bit. Next subject is music. Same thing applies. There are games completely based on music, DDR, Guitar Hero. Those games are strictly music with some button mashing. The button mashing gets complicated. The reward is, hey, I was able to do this, but my friends weren't. Music can make or break an entire game. At the same time, it also depends on the kind of game. Imagine if you played Donkey Kong 64 and you had Halo music or Call of Duty or any other music, horror games music like Amnesia. Imagine playing Donkey Kong 64 with Amnesia's music. How do you think that would make you feel playing that game? Be a little weird. Or even Zelda. Let's imagine playing Zelda Ocarina of Time without the ability to play your ocarina, and instead you get a Wind Waker, and the Wind Waker takes you to places and whatnot, but it doesn't play real music, which I love Zelda Wind Waker. I'm not dogging on Wind Waker. I'm just saying the first time I played Zelda Wind Waker, I had a very far-fetched opinion of the game because it was the first time I experienced Zelda stepping away from the same type of musicality, and it was different. I was adjusted to the previous games, which is another thing that leads into sequeling your games and how you're wanting to sequel your games. They didn't do it wrong. Nintendo has a way of innovating. They threw a hardball at me, and it taught me to expect on their next games, to expect changes, not to expect the same thing over and over again. And that's fine. Some games need change. Some games don't need very much change. I'm personally not a fan of Call of Duty. That game is re-released many times with, from what I've seen, very subtle differences. However, it still holds up. It still sells better than the last every single time for some odd reason. I'm not entirely sure what stands on that. So this is more of a compilation of thoughts I wanted to get together to determine what makes a good game. I'm currently working on a platformer myself, kind of similar to the Conkers Bad Fur Day era, and I'm just getting these together so that I can rightfully make my game and get it put together successfully as a fun format for everybody to play. Again, thank you for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button and subscribe. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday.